Sana believed she understood the truth about God and the afterlife, until a freak accident turned her world upside down. Now, she shares a near-death experience so profound, it upended everything she thought she knew about religion and eternity. Here is her story. My name is Sana Malik and I'm 47 years old. I live in a modest two-story house in Lansing, Michigan, where I've spent most of my adult life. Before everything changed, I was just an ordinary mom, working as a pharmacy technician at the local CVS and raising my two teenagers alongside my husband Fareed. Growing up in a devout Muslim family, faith was the cornerstone of my life. I prayed 5 times a day without fail, fasted diligently during Ramadan, and followed the teachings ingrained in me since childhood. My parents emigrated from Pakistan before I was born, and they ensured we upheld our religious traditions in America. That winter morning started like any other. I was rushing through my early routine, preparing breakfast for the kids before school. The news murmured in the background. Something about an approaching snowstorm later that week. I made a mental note to stock up on groceries after work. What I didn't realize was that danger had already crept into our home. Our carbon monoxide detector had been malfunctioning for weeks. The batteries were dead, a task both Fareed and I had somehow overlooked during our usual house maintenance routine. Unbeknownst to us, our aging furnace had developed a crack in its heat exchanger, allowing the invisible, odorless gas to seep into our home. As I packed lunches, I felt a wave of dizziness but dismissed it as exhaustion. My daughter, Layla, complained of a headache and asked to stay home from school. Upstairs, my son, Tariq, was already in the shower. Fareed had left early for his engineering job downtown. The dizziness intensified as I loaded the dishwasher. My vision blurred and the room began to spin. I remember reaching for my phone to dial 911, but my fingers felt numb and uncoordinated. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Layla's terrified face as I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. I later learned that Layla, despite feeling sick herself, had managed to call emergency services. Firefighters arrived within minutes, discovering dangerous levels of carbon monoxide throughout the house. They pulled us out just in time, me unconscious, Layla barely able to walk, and Tariq, who had collapsed in the shower. The paramedics told me later that my heart had stopped for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I was clinically dead. But what I experienced during those minutes changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what comes after. Looking back, I see now that my whole life had led to that moment. Years of devoted prayers, unquestioned religious teachings, and certainty about the afterlife hadn't prepared me for what I was about to encounter. The doctor called it luck. If Layla hadn't called when she did, if the responders had been delayed, or if the gas levels had been slightly higher, none of us would have survived. But I know now, it wasn't luck. What happened next was a divine appointment that shattered my understanding of faith and life itself. For years, I measured my life by how well I followed the rules. Did I pray on time? Was I modest enough? Was I setting a good example for my children as a faithful Muslim woman? These questions shaped my every decision. My marriage to Fareed was built on shared values, and we raised our children the same way, teaching them to uphold our beliefs and attend weekend Islamic school. Even at work, my faith was tested. Handling prescriptions that contradicted Islamic teachings or serving customers with lifestyles I disapproved of challenged my beliefs. Yet, I reminded myself it wasn't my role to judge, only Allah's. The morning of my near-death experience, I remember feeling especially fortunate. Layla had just been accepted to Michigan State University with a full scholarship. Tariq's grades were improving after a rocky start in high school. Fareed had recently been promoted. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place for a family that followed all the right rules. As I stood by the kitchen window that morning, I watched the neighbor kids waiting for the school bus, bundled up against the biting Michigan cold. Mrs. Peterson next door was shoveling her driveway, and I made a mental note to send Tariq over to help her later. These ordinary moments felt so stable, so permanent. I had no idea that within hours, everything I believed about life, death, God, and truth itself would be turned upside down. The foundation I had built my life on was about to collapse like a house of cards in a strong wind. They say near-death experiences change people, but what happened to me was beyond change. It was like being born again with entirely new eyes, seeing the world as it truly is for the first time. The truth I discovered during those 4 minutes and 37 seconds would not only transform my life but also ripple through the lives of those around me. As I went about my morning routine that day, I had no way of knowing that by sunset, I would carry a message so urgent and profound that it would become my life's mission to share it with anyone who would listen, a message about what truly awaits us on the other side, the nature of God, and how our choices in this life echo into eternity. The moment my heart stopped beating, everything changed. There wasn't a tunnel of light like in other stories. Instead, it was as if I had been suddenly plunged into ice-cold water, a shock that reverberated through every part of me. I found myself floating above my body in the ambulance. The paramedics worked frantically, their voices muffled as though I were hearing them through thick glass. One performed chest compressions while another prepared the defibrillator. I could see myself lying there, pale and lifeless, still in my blue CVS uniform shirt, with the silver necklace Fareed had given me for our anniversary. But the strangest part? I wasn't afraid. It was like watching a scene from a movie, detached but deeply observant. I noticed details I wouldn't have otherwise. The paramedic's coffee-stained sleeve, a crack in the ambulance ceiling shaped like a question mark. And then, suddenly, everything went dark. Not the kind of darkness you see when you close your eyes, but a heavy, suffocating void that felt alive, pressing in on me. I could feel myself being pulled deeper and deeper by some unseen force. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. A presence filled the void, beautiful and terrifying all at once. It didn't have a physical form, but I knew it was an angel. Not the gentle kind you see on greeting cards, but something ancient and unimaginably powerful. Just being near it made my soul tremble. The angel didn't speak with words. Instead, it flooded my mind with images and understanding, revealing my entire life. Not just the things I had done, but the ripple effects of every choice I had ever made. I saw moments I had forgotten. Times when I'd been unkind to a coworker and how that small act had ruined her day, or when I'd helped an elderly customer with her prescriptions and given her hope at her lowest point. But what shocked me the most was seeing how my devotion to Islam had impacted others. I had encouraged people to follow stricter practices, believing I was helping them. The angel showed me that I had actually pushed them further from the truth. I wanted to argue, to defend my beliefs, but in the presence of this divine being, my arguments felt hollow and meaningless. The angel then showed me scenes from history I had never known, truths about Muhammad that had been altered or hidden over time. It was as if scales fell from my eyes and suddenly I saw everything clearly. The darkness around us began to change and I could see countless souls moving through it, thousands, maybe millions. Some were being drawn upward toward a light I hadn't noticed before, while others drifted downward, their forms dimming as they descended. The angel showed me why. Each soul's destination wasn't random. It was a direct result of what they had believed and how they had lived. I saw Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and people of other faiths, all discovering that their sincere beliefs weren't enough. The truth had always been available, but they had chosen other paths. I watched as some souls realized their mistakes too late. They called out to Allah, to their prophets, to their gods, but no answers came. The angel revealed to me that there was only one way to reach the light above, only one truth that could save a soul from falling into the darkness. The angel guided me closer to the descending souls and the experience was beyond terrifying. Their anguish felt like a crushing physical force. I saw people I'd known in life, good people who had prayed 5 times a day and given generously to charity, being pulled downward. Their prayers to Allah echoed uselessly in the void. I recognized Brother Fareed, who had led prayers at our mosque for years. He was there, his soul dimming as he descended, still clutching his prayer beads. Beside him was Sister Yasmin, who had taught Quran classes to our children. Their faces reflected the same devastating realization I was feeling. All our devotion had been misplaced. The angel then revealed something that broke my heart. Souls of children who had passed away, some of them from my own community. Unlike the adults, these children were being drawn gently upward toward the light. The angel helped me understand that they were innocent, untouched by the weight of false beliefs. This revelation filled me with both comfort and sorrow. Comfort because they were spared the fate of others, but sorrow, knowing how many parents would never be reunited with their children. As we moved deeper into this spiritual space, I noticed something strange. Some souls were bound by chains, not heavy metal ones but radiant chains made of light. Yet their glow was deceptive. These chains weren't liberating but constraining. They were forged from beliefs, traditions, and practices that had shaped their earthly lives. Then I saw my own chains. They shimmered with Arabic calligraphy and familiar Islamic symbols. Beautiful, yes, but unbearably heavy, pulling me downward with their weight. The angel then took me to a place unlike anything I'd ever imagined, a vast courtroom made entirely of light. Souls appeared before a judge I could not see directly. The presence was too holy, too brilliant for me to perceive. Each soul's life was laid bare, not just their actions, but the beliefs they had clung to when the truth had been within their reach. I watched as a woman I recognized from my mosque was shown her life. She saw every moment she'd dismissed the gospel, every instance she'd walked past a church or ignored the words of Christian missionaries. Each of these moments was like a witness against her, evidence of the opportunities she'd turned away from. The truth had always been there, but she had chosen to stay rooted in her familiar beliefs. Then it was my turn. Every time I had declared the Shahada with pride, every time I had taught my children that Jesus was merely a prophet, every time I dismissed the Bible as corrupted, all of it was laid bare. The weight of my error was suffocating. But unlike the others I had seen, my judgment wasn't final. The angel communicated that this was a chance for me to learn, to understand, and to prepare for a mission. I would be given the opportunity to return, but first, I needed to see more, much more. As we began ascending toward the light, I could feel my chains loosening. They weren't gone, but their grip on me was weakening. The higher we moved, the stronger the light became. It wasn't harsh or blinding, it was warm and all-encompassing, like being embraced by pure love itself. I started to see what looked like distinct realms, each one more breathtaking than the last. But the angel made it clear, these weren't the layered heavens I'd been taught about in Islam. This was something entirely different, something far beyond what I had ever imagined or believed. Then I saw him, Jesus Christ, not as I had known him through Islamic teachings as merely a prophet or a good man, but as God himself. His presence was overwhelming, filled with a love so pure and powerful, it felt as though it would break me apart. The lies I'd believed about him fell away like autumn leaves in a strong wind. I suddenly understood the truth of the Trinity, not three separate gods but one God in three persons. What once seemed impossible now felt like the clearest reality, like seeing color for the first time after living in black and white. The angel showed me scenes from history, the real history, not the version I'd been taught. I saw Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, both of which, I'd been told, never happened. I watched the early Christian church spreading its message. Then I was shown how other religions, including Islam, had distorted these truths over time. I learned how political power and human ambition had shaped the teachings I'd followed so devotedly. The Muhammad I saw in these revelations was far removed from the perfect prophet I had revered. But this revelation wasn't given to condemn Muslims. The angel helped me understand how millions of sincere people had been misled. Satan had carefully woven a deception over centuries, exploiting humanity's natural longing for structure and rules to draw them away from salvation. The angel then led me to what appeared to be a vast library, but instead of books, it held the stories of people's lives. Not just what they had done, but what they could have done. I saw alternate versions of my own life, paths I could have taken if I had accepted the truth sooner. I saw my children growing up free from the weight of false beliefs and my husband and me leading others toward true freedom rather than deeper bondage. Then came the hardest part. I was shown the people I'd influenced, friends I encouraged to be stricter in Islam, neighbors I invited to the mosque, and even my own children whom I had taught to reject Christian beliefs. The angel made me understand that I was accountable not just for my own choices but for how I had shaped the lives of others. Amid this heavy realization, I was also shown hope. I saw how my near-death experience would inspire others, helping them question their beliefs and begin their own journeys toward truth. The angel showed me Muslims who would hear my story and break free from the same chains that had bound me. As the light grew brighter, I found myself in what I can only describe as the throne room of heaven. The presence of God here was beyond anything I had ever imagined. This wasn't the distant, impersonal Allah I had prayed to 5 times a day. This was a loving Father who knew me completely and loved me perfectly. All my previous notions of worship felt pale and hollow compared to the overwhelming reality of His presence. In the throne room of heaven, I witnessed something that forever changed my understanding of salvation. I saw souls entering heaven, not because of their own merits or good deeds, but through their faith in Jesus Christ. Their lives reflected this faith through sacraments and good works inspired by the Holy Spirit. I realized salvation was a gift of grace, received through faith, affirmed by sacraments, and demonstrated through deeds. The angel showed me how my devotion to Islamic law, my ritual prayers, fasting, and strict adherence to rules, had not brought me closer to God. Instead, they had become barriers, attempts to earn what could only be freely given through faith in Christ and participation in His sacrifice. I was allowed to witness conversations in heaven, souls meeting Jesus face to face. Some had been Muslims like me, others Hindus, Buddhists, or atheists. Many of them said, "But I was so sure I was right." They encountered overwhelming love, but for some it was too late. The angel then took me to see the saints of Christian history. They weren't distant or unapproachable. They were alive, humble, and vibrant, worshiping alongside former Muslims who had found the truth during their lives. There was no hierarchy, just a shared celebration of God's grace. Next, I was shown hell. It wasn't the caricature of devils with pitchforks. The torment came from being utterly separated from God. The flames were both real and symbolic of unending anguish. I saw religious leaders I had respected, men and women who had led thousands astray. Their suffering was magnified by the knowledge of how many souls their influence had misled. Yet, even in their torment, they acknowledged the justice of their fate. The angel revealed something that broke my heart. Millions of Muslims earnestly praying, but their prayers hitting what looked like a brass ceiling. It wasn't that God didn't hear them, but they were praying to a false understanding of Him. Satan had used their sincerity to keep them trapped in religious performance, preventing them from finding true salvation through faith in Jesus Christ, the sacraments, and works inspired by genuine faith. The angel showed me my future if I chose to return. I saw rejection from my Muslim community, struggles within my family, and accusations of betrayal and mental illness. But I also saw the lives that would be transformed through my testimony. The angel made it clear. This path would be hard, but eternally significant. I was given a choice: remain in the peace of heaven, or return to share what I'd learned. Part of me wanted to stay, but when I saw how many lives, including my family's, could be changed, I knew what I had to do. Before I left, the angel gave me one final vision, my own judgment day. This time, I saw myself standing before Jesus as my Savior, hearing the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The joy of that moment outweighed the pain I knew I would face. Returning to my body was like being squeezed through a narrow tunnel. My chest ached from the CPR, and the hospital lights were blinding after the heavenly light I had experienced. The first face I saw was Fareed's, tears streaming down as he held my hand. My children were there too, their eyes red from crying. The doctors called it luck, but I knew better. This was no accident. When I tried to explain what I had seen, Fareed dismissed it as confusion from lack of oxygen. Layla and Tariq exchanged worried glances, unsure how to respond. The hardest weeks followed. Word spread quickly in our Muslim community. Friends of decades stopped speaking to me, and the imam suggested I seek psychiatric help. My parents called from Pakistan, begging me to recant, their voices filled with heartbreak. At first, Fareed was patient, thinking my change was a phase, but when I stopped attending the mosque and began going to a local church, praying the rosary, reading the Bible, and participating in the sacraments, things grew tense. We argued about what to tell the children and whether I was losing my mind. Slowly, though, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out privately, other Muslims with doubts or questions. A friend from the mosque admitted she'd been secretly attending church, curious about Christianity. Layla began asking questions, truly listening to my answers. 6 months after my experience, I spoke at a small church. I was terrified, but as I shared my story, the words flowed. People cried, including Muslims who had come out of curiosity. 3 people accepted Christ that day, committing to baptism and lives of faith. 2 years later, our house has become an unofficial meeting place for seekers, former Muslims, doubters, and others with supernatural experiences. Fareed hasn't accepted my new faith, but he's softened. Last week I caught him reading the Gospel of John in secret. The death threats have mostly stopped, though hateful messages still trickle in. None of it matters. After what I've seen, after knowing the truth, nothing in this temporary life scares me anymore. My greatest joy came 3 months ago when Layla told me she'd been secretly praying to Jesus. She shared how she felt God's love while reading the Bible I gave her and expressed a desire to participate in the sacraments and live out her faith. Tariq is still wrestling with everything, but he's asking questions. Every night I thank God for this second chance to help others find the truth. I know my story sounds unbelievable. 2 years ago I wouldn't have believed it myself, but I can't deny what I've seen or stay silent. Too many sincere people are on the wrong path, just as I was. If even one person finds the truth through my testimony, it will all have been worth it.